Welcome to Behind the Facts, a podcast that focuses on shining a light on the individuals that work behind the scenes, curbing the spread of false and misleading information, and fostering a culture of accuracy. I am your host, Thipe Maelane.
In a world where information is power, what happens when foreign manipulation and interference comes into play? In this episode, we unpack the impact of foreign information manipulation and interference, also known as FIMI, on the African continent and look at its real-world implications and effects. Today, I'm joined by one of my colleagues who is a research fellow and a PhD candidate.
Thank you, Thipe. I am Samba Dialimpa Badji, research fellow and PhD candidate at Oslo Metropolitan University in Norway. So my research focuses on disinformation, fact-checking in context of conflict, and specifically focusing on two African countries, Ethiopia and Mali, as a case study and field of my research.
Thank you, Samba. I think getting right into today's conversation, the first thing that everybody's possibly asking themselves right now, what is foreign information manipulation and interference? It's a lot of words, it speaks about a lot of things, and it sounds like it's packed. If you can just break it down and give us an explainer of what FIMI is.
Yeah, as you said, it's a lot of words. Foreign information, manipulation, and interference. FIMI, it refers to tactics that are used by foreign entities to disrupt a country, to disrupt a nation, using disinformation, propaganda, and other type of method that are designed to achieve particular objectives, whether they are political, economic, destabilizing a country. So in simpler terms, FIMI involve a foreign actor, so foreign actor, be it a government, corporation, or group, or it depends on what type of entity it is, that is targeting a specific country. And the foreign actor will use strategies that include deliberately distorting or fabricating information. And the aim is to mislead the public and also working to influence political processes in the targeted country or to manipulate public opinion to achieve a specific objective. So you have a foreign entity using information, manipulation, and influence tactic to target another nation. So that's how we can schematize this concept of FIMI.
And you've mentioned quite a number of things, like, for instance, the players. You say it can be governments, it can be corporations, or it can be groups. When we're looking at the sort of players that are in this space that are trying to distort and fabricate information for a specific end, who are the key players or producers that perpetrate FIMI in the region that you're well versed in or the country that you come from?
Okay, so I think we have various actors, various players. I would say, let's take like specific context like West Africa or the Sahel region, because this is the part of Africa that is widely cited as a setting for FIMI. We will start with Russia, as Russia is the usual suspect, and as it is a hot topic regarding its influence in the Sahel region. So Russia is the key player in terms of foreign information manipulation and influence in the region. We have China. China is also very, very, very active. It is also notable in the region. There is also a key player that is often goes unnoticed. It's Turkey. Is also a major player in the region, deploying its influence to support its economic influence in the region, using also this strategy, using the media to expand its influence. And additionally, we cannot forget the long-standing players in the region, such as France, the US, and Great Britain. So, as I said, Russia is the usual suspect, but we have these long-standing players, France, US, Great Britain. These nations have consistently leveraged the media to shape narrative and sway public opinion across the African continent. So while they may argue that this isn't a foreign influence, but it certainly is. So these are also the key players. They are long-standing players. They have a huge influence in the continent. Now, I will state something. I think that by also focusing only on foreign influence of FIMI, we are obscuring the agenda of local actors such as certain states, like in the Sahel. I would cite some states like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, which also uses influence tactics, manipulation on their opinion in a strategy to maintain the power. So I think also maybe there is a need to better conceptualize, to understand that also these manipulative tactics are not only coming from foreign actors, but now local actors are also using these tactics for their own agenda.
You're listening to Behind the Facts.
This is Behind the Facts.
This is Behind the Facts.
This is Behind the
This
Facts.
is Behind the Facts.
You're listening to Behind the Facts.
Thanks for tuning in into Behind the Facts.
You mentioned the local actors, which I think is very important because, as the FIMI suggests, we look at the foreign players, the Russias, the Chinas, and as you've surprisingly highlighted, Turkey. And you've also got the long-standing players that have been there. But the countries that you mentioned, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, those countries are quite close to one another in terms of their location. And when we're looking at the effects of FIMI on development in these affected countries, would you be able to provide us with one or two case studies or examples of how, for instance, the economy is impacted, society maybe is impacted, maybe health responses are impacted? Are there any examples that you can cite of where FIMI has actually affected the development in some of these countries?
Okay, I think that in the Sahel region, when we look at the developments of events in recent years, we can see that, FIMI has a huge impact in the region, and it also has affected the relationships between neighboring countries like Burkina Faso and Cote d'Ivoire. There are huge tension between these countries because Burkina Faso is deploying a campaign to show that Cote d'Ivoire, also Benin, are plotting with France, as conspiring with France to destabilize the country, and they use this manipulation tactic to convince their own opinion that, that these countries are conspiring with France to destabilize. There is, for instance, one report that was broadcast on national TV in Niger saying that, France have recruited mercenaries and they are being trained in Benin to attack Niger. And in the report, when you look at the report, you will realize that the video that is shown on the TV report also just displays Prigozhin and his fighters of Wagner Group, and then the national television of Niger showed that as mercenaries that have been recruited by France and trained in Benin to attack Niger. So you see that even governments are using this tactic in the argument they have each other in that region. So, for instance, in the Sahel region, these tactics, FIMI has created a huge tension between different countries. Like at some point, there was also tension between Mali and Mauritania a while ago. So it's very concerning. And at the same time, I can also, cite some different examples. Since FIMI is not a new issue, even though it has gained more attention now with the development of technology, with social media, etc. But as far as you look at in the history, you will see that it has been widely used by different countries. For example, the United States used this tactic in Latin America to destabilize countries, to promote regime change. As far as I remember, there was the case in Guatemala in 1954. You will see that same events in many countries like Nicaragua, Chile, and recently in Venezuela. We can see how the US involved there. In the history, we can also see how France also used different media and manipulation tactics to destabilize some African countries. So it's a long story, even though it is gaining more attention now.
And Samba, I'm sure it affects all areas, especially when you highlight these sort of tensions between the countries that you indicated in some of your examples. It impacts other areas. It can impact trade. It can impact the relations between the countries. And so these are deliberate disinformation campaigns, from what I am getting from what you're saying. And for our audience who's listening and might not be sure about the distinction between misinformation and disinformation, simply put, is the intention behind it. Whereas misinformation is not meant to manipulate people or distort the facts, but it can cause harm. You also highlight that FIMI is not a new issue. And when we look at it from that perspective, then, how do we spot or counter this type of disinformation? What role should communicators play in trying to mitigate some of the impacts that come with being exposed to FIMI and the spread of this type of information?
I think there are different tactics, strategies that can be used when it comes to, spotting or tackling, countering FIMI. I think because in FIMI you have different tactics that are used, and among those tactics you have disinformation is used, propaganda, even direct involvement in some aspect of the daily life. I will give a quite example of something that happens early this year. This narrative regarding the genocide of white people in South Africa and where it came from and how it was pushed on the information landscape. I think this one is a great example of FIMI, how it has been deployed on social media, especially on X, by Elon Musk and his bots and all accounts, on X, and how it has been also framed on some media in the US as a genuine story. So I think to spot it, it's important to look at the whole information landscape. And when I say information landscape, it's from the traditional media to social media to see what is called an authentic behavior of some social media users, how they're pushing some narratives, how they are framing stories. For example, when the story regarding genocide in South Africa, when it started to be pushed, you will see that there was some, new accounts pushing the story and some media also taking that story coming in. So I think it's important, first of all, to watch on the media landscape all this unauthentic behavior coming from social media, coming from the traditional media, how they are framing stories, how they are pushing some narrative. It's important to promote also media pluralism in the countries, because I think also one of the problem with disinformation, with media manipulation, is when we are in a space where media pluralism is not that strong, and also build also a very strong cyberspace where we have good regulatory rules without undermining freedom of expression. I think it's more and more important now to train local influencers, because they are key players on the space, and they can also be manipulated or tools for manipulation if they are not well trained and not aware about all these manipulative tactics. So it's important to have a very holistic approach that consider all aspects of the media landscape of the cyberspace when it comes to spotting and countering FIMI, because it is deployed in different way. It used different tactics. For example, there was a case in Europe that was called Qatar Gate, where Qatar is accused to try to extend its influence in Europe by bribing some member of parliament of the European Union Parliament. This is also FIMI, So it's not only looking at the media landscape, not the media, social media, but also the real life activities, how some politician can be also targeted, bribed to push some foreign interests. So that's why I think it's important to have a very holistic approach while working on the cyberspace, on the media landscape, but also, having very strong policies targeting local actors to make them aware of how foreign actors can be influential or can try to destabilize a specific country by using different tactics. I am Samba Dialimpa Badji from Oslo Metropolitan University in Norway, and you are listening to Behind the Facts.
Samba, I appreciate that you brought in an example from Southern Africa, even as much as FIMI has taken root in West Africa, as you indicated earlier in our discussion. And you also highlighted that there are things on social media, such as inauthentic behavior, that can also influence the spread of this type of disinformation, which leads to people making uninformed decisions about very serious things a lot of the time. I would like to thank you for joining us today, for sharing your insights with us. It really is an eye-opener to get a better understanding of what FIMI is and how it impacts us and why we should be looking out for it. Thank you, Samba.
It was a pleasure to be part of this conversation. Thank you very much, Thipe.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe. I have been your host, Thipe Maelane, and this is Behind the Facts.